It was supposed to be just another night under the stars. Laughter echoing through the trees, the crackle of the fire painting shadows across their faces, and stories shared like sacred secrets between friends. 5 teenagers had pitched their tents near an old swamp deep in Arkansas, a place avoided by the locals and whispered about in half-told tales. They'd heard the legends, sure, about the so-called water spirits said to dwell in the bog. But at that age, legends are just that, bedtime fuel for thrill seekers. The fire burned low as the night crept past midnight. The forest hushed as if it were holding its breath. That's when Jake heard it, a whisper, faint, gentle, almost like someone calling his name, but not quite. The voice floated from the edge of the swamp, too soft to catch fully, yet impossible to ignore. Jake stood up, thinking one of his friends was playing a prank. "Very funny," he muttered as he stepped past the dim glow of the firelight. The others didn't stir. They were half asleep or pretending to be. The whisper came again, closer now, like it was leading him. He moved toward the water's edge, the soil growing damp beneath his shoes, the air thick with the scent of wet moss and something older, something ancient. That's when he saw it. A figure crouched down, back turned to him. The shape was small, unmoving, and entirely silent. Its hair hung down in tangled strands, dripping, almost blending into the water below. Jake hesitated. Was this one of his friends trying to scare him? He stepped closer. The figure didn't move. Closer still. Nothing. Finally, he reached out, hand trembling, and just as his fingers brushed the figure's shoulder, it dissolved. Not into water, not into smoke, but into something darker, something cold, like the absence of all light. And then, it was gone. Jake stumbled backward and screamed. The kind of scream that empties your lungs and freezes the night. His friends came running, flashlights cutting through the dark, but Jake was already sprinting back to camp, face drained of color, hands shaking uncontrollably. He didn't say much that night, just sat by the fire, eyes locked on the shadows. The next morning, he packed up without a word. He never joined them on a camping trip again. Years later, a local historian revealed something chilling. In the 1800s, a series of unexplained vanishings had occurred right near that swamp. Same area, same season. And each story ended the same way. The last thing heard before the person vanished was a whisper. They were looking for quiet, just 2 sisters, Natalie and Claire, trading city noise for summer stillness in Alaska's Tongass National Forest. They pitched their tent in a wide clearing, far from any trail, where the trees stood like ancient giants and the breeze carried the scent of pine and damp earth. That first day felt like magic. They hiked, took photos, laughed over burned marshmallows, and watched the stars poke holes in the night sky. Everything was perfect until the clock struck 3:15 a.m. That's when it began. A sound shattered the silence, high-pitched, human, a scream. Not just any scream, it was sharp, raw, filled with something you only recognize when you hear real fear. They sat up, hearts racing, frozen. "Maybe it's just a fox," Claire whispered, trying to believe her own words. But deep down, both of them knew it didn't sound like any animal they'd ever heard. The next day, they avoided talking about it. They distracted themselves with hikes and river swims, but as the sun began to sink, unease crept in. When darkness fell, they zipped up the tent tight and clutched their flashlights close. At 3:15 a.m. sharp, it came again, this time louder, closer. The same chilling scream, now just beyond the trees. Claire peeked through the mesh window and whispered, "There's nothing there," but something was. They could feel it. The kind of presence that makes your skin crawl and your breath catch in your throat. They didn't sleep the rest of the night. And then came the third night. At exactly 3:15 a.m., the scream didn't come from the forest. It came from right outside the tent. And then again, closer, inside the camp. Natalie grabbed the flashlight and unzipped the tent in one swift motion. They both stepped out, light beams cutting through the mist. The fire pit was cold, the gear untouched, but around the tent, bare footprints, small, barefoot, circling again and again, pressing deep into the dirt like someone had walked in place for hours. They weren't alone. They ran. Left the tent, their food, their clothes, everything. They didn't stop running until sunrise broke through the trees. Days later, when they returned with their father and a forest ranger, what they found was worse than they imagined. The tent had been slashed open, cut in long, deliberate lines. And carved into several trees nearby were symbols, deep, looping shapes that no one could identify. No animal tracks, no signs of a prank, just silence. The ranger later admitted, off the record, that others had gone missing in those woods over the years, always near that clearing. Some locals claim to have seen a woman walking the woods in old-fashioned clothing, her face hidden by her hair, always seen around the same time, 3:15 a.m. They were just three college friends looking for a quiet escape. The plan was simple: get off the grid for the weekend, set up camp near a forgotten trail deep in the interior of Mato Grosso, and trade the digital world for stories under the stars. The trail they chose had a strange reputation. Locals called it the Old Path, once used by explorers and traders, long since overtaken by vines and silence. When they asked around in the nearest village, an elderly woman simply said, "People don't camp there anymore." She didn't explain, just looked at them with tired eyes and a quiet shake of the head. But that only made them more curious. By the time they reached the clearing, the sun was setting, painting the trees gold. They laughed, pitched their tents, lit a fire, and passed around snacks and ghost stories. They didn't know they were about to live one. Sometime after midnight, the forest went still. Not calm, silent. Unnaturally silent. No insects, no breeze, not even the rustle of leaves. And then, footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Crunching through leaves and twigs like someone walking with weight and purpose. The friends froze. Then they saw it. A dim, flickering light weaving through the trees. A lantern. Not a flashlight. A lantern. Old-fashioned, the kind with a soft yellow glow and a metal frame. It bobbed up and down, always the same distance away, never getting closer. For nearly an hour, the figure carrying it walked in a slow, wide circle around the campsite, never speaking, never stopping. They called out, "Hey, you okay? Need help?" No response. Just the lantern, moving like clockwork. One of them, Yoao, decided to approach. He stepped forward, flashlight aimed, but the beam couldn't cut through the dark beyond the lantern. It was as if the light itself resisted modern light, bending the shadows around it. He backed off. They stayed awake all night, huddled together, watching the glow drift back and forth like a ghostly pendulum. And as dawn approached, the light began to fade, not flicker out, but dissolve, like mist in sunlight. Then it vanished. No sound, no trace. They packed up in silence and drove back to town. When they stopped for gas, an old man watching them from a bench spoke first. "You saw him, didn't you?" Confused, they nodded. "The man with the lantern. He's been walking that trail for over a century, looking for his boy. Got separated during an expedition. Died searching. Never found him." The friends didn't know what to say. The man just looked out at the road. "You're not the first to see him. You won't be the last." And that was it. Since then, others have reported the same thing in that region. An old-fashioned light moving through the trees, always silent, always searching. It was supposed to be a routine camping trip, organized, supervised, safe. A group of scouts had set out into a remote part of California's forest, where each pair of kids was assigned a numbered section along a long, looping trail. Everything was logged, mapped, timed. The adults were experienced. The terrain was familiar. For 2 nights, everything went smoothly. Meals by the fire, badges earned, and stories shared under the open sky. But on the morning of the 3rd day, something was wrong. At breakfast, 2 boys were missing. They were assigned to Tent 9 at the far end of the trail's loop. When one of the scout leaders hiked down to check on them, what he found sent a chill through the camp. The tent was zipped shut. Inside, both sleeping bags were neatly arranged, still warm, backpacks untouched. Flashlights still had battery. It looked like the boys had simply vanished mid-dream. No struggle, no sign of panic, no drag marks or footprints leaving the site. When the others caught wind of it, panic spread. Search parties were formed immediately. The area was combed for hours. K9 units were brought in by local authorities. Nothing. The dogs picked up no trail, not even a partial scent. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed them whole. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. Later that afternoon, one of the other scouts, quiet, pale, shaking, pulled a leader aside and said, "I saw someone go into Tent 9 last night." When pressed, the boy insisted it wasn't one of the missing kids or a scout leader. "He was too tall," he whispered. like really tall. I thought maybe it was one of the adults, but the way he moved, it wasn't right. He described the figure as towering and slow-moving, almost gliding between trees. The scout didn't think much of it at the time, until the morning when the tent stood zipped and empty. Authorities launched a full investigation. Helicopters scanned the woods, and rangers from neighboring districts joined the search. Nothing was found. No clothing, no supplies, no human trace. The only consistent element, Tent 9. Ever since then, Trail 9 has been permanently closed, sealed off by park officials, who cite environmental instability as the reason, though locals know better. Even veteran rangers avoid that section, refusing to talk about it openly. Whispered stories speak of other strange sightings in that area. Tall silhouettes watching from the trees, faint hums at night, and cold spots even in the height of summer. The two boys were never found. Their names still sit on a list in the county office, unresolved, unexplained. And somewhere deep in the trees of Trail 9, a tent still stands alone, zippered shut, as if waiting for its next occupants.